Well, we are live and on air, and it's a beautiful morning here in the Midwest because it's warm by comparison to the last couple of months, and that's always a glorious thing. We've got 40-degree temperatures in the Chicagoland region, lots of fog, lots of mist, and our mountains of snow are vanishing at an astonishing rate. So if you come to Chicago right now, you will be able to enjoy multiple seasons all at once. You know, we've got the spring thaw, we've still got the winter coming back tomorrow, and it's a multi-level experience. How are you this morning, Barret and Charlie?
Doing great, doing great.
That old adage, right? If you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes; it'll change.
Yeah, and that's, everybody likes to regionalize it to their area, but I think that's pretty true globally. It seems like wherever you go on the planet,
Yeah,
it's very whimsical. It is a process of whimsy because it's, again, a reflection of our own ego
yeah.
that is creating all these things. So today is kind of an interesting day in that it is we're getting into that cycle of getting ready for Passover. We've passed over Fat Tuesday and Ash Wednesday. Now we've got Chinese New Year, the year of the dog, and the new moon. Valentine's Day is over, and unfortunately, we saw another Valentine's Day disaster. It seems like Valentine's Day is often the edgy one, where you're thinking about, your beloved on Valentine's Day and contemplating the possibility of breakup or divorce the day after. It seems like there's all kinds of edges that come out around this particular season of the year. And then, of course, the incident in Florida that really, we can't ignore it. We have to explore what really happened there and explore how we're responding to it in order to be able to effectively and appropriately respond to it.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up, Chris, because you're right. A part of our work with the spiritual path is really being willing to look at everything. And we can't just, wish things away or pretend they aren't happening. We have to look them right in the face. And with this school shooting that just happened yesterday, being able to acknowledge our own pain and seeing this happening again, our own suffering over the story that's unfolding there, and all the pain that people are going through that are connected to what happened. So, even though as we study the Course, we come to see that this world is a dream, it doesn't mean that we deny what happens here. It actually means that we confront it head on, and we look at the emotions that are connected to that. And ultimately, we will come to a place where even in these really intense and painful moments, we can find a greater sense of calm and equanimity. But this is a process, right? And in order to get to that level, it's really important that we don't hide our feelings and emotions around what's unfolding in the now.
Yeah, and I often think too in these situations, one of the scariest things about it at all is this fear that we have of recognizing this is us. The story the Course is telling us and what the Course is teaching us is that we are one, and we are living in a dream world, a world of illusion, thinking we are separate one from another. And then we have these horrific events that take place in this dream world, and we are all set and ready to say, it is him. It is my brother. It's that guy. It's not me. And the truth of the matter is there's just one of us here having this dream. All these nightmares, there's no, as the Course teaches, no hierarchy in these illusions. So, we need to recognize, or it's an opportunity, I should say, it's an opportunity to recognize that that this is us. This is the Son of God, believing that he's separate from his Father, and that these things are possible. In this world that we've made up, these things are possible, and it's always such a shock for us when they take place, and yet it's such a wonderful opportunity to see exactly what we, Son of God, have created for ourselves in this illusion. We often talk about being a dream world. Well, this is when the nightmare pops up. It's Chris was just touching on the fact it was Valentine's Day, and here we get a mass shooting. It's what a dichotomy, what an opposite, a day we're all expressing love one to another, and one of us, right, one of us separate ones goes and does that. So there's a lot to Barret, as you were just touching on, a lot to reflect on here for all of us in these things.
Yeah, that's very true. And it is so obvious when you stop and just look at reality. You go to bed at night and you have these profound dreams with a cast of hundreds, if not thousands, of people moving through this world that you are creating in your mind. And looking at the parallel, it becomes very obvious that this world is made up of the same content that our personal dream worlds are made up of. So if you have a dream and you're wearing funny shoes and one of those red bobs on your nose, running around playing the role of the clown, doing things that are mischievous, you wake up the next morning and you're thinking, what the hell was that all about? That made absolutely no sense. But then you open your door and walk out into the world and just stop trying to justify what you're seeing in your mind and just observe. And it is very, very obvious that this world is a lunatic asylum. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And so in parallel with that, it also becomes obvious that there is one dreamer having the dream. It is not a case of multiple individuals. It is that singular dreamer that needs to awaken to the fact that the dream it has created, not he or she, but it has created, has gotten completely and totally out of control and off the rails. And that's the only way that we can really start to approach horrific events, whether it's a school shooting in Florida or a Holocaust in Germany or, a Holocaust for Native Americans. I mean, all the horrors of this world really are coming out of this one mind, attacking itself and going up and down the scale, trying to find a place where there is a sense of security, where there is a sense of safety and being able to be at peace. And as long as we remain in the world, obviously, that is not going to be a place that we can attain.
Yeah, you guys are really making excellent points around this. And a lot of what you're both saying is about how we have to undo the separation, right? This idea, as Charlie said, as you said too, Chris, that our kind of first thought is, oh, well, they're to blame, right? It's that other person who's doing this. But what we don't see in that moment is that there is just one ego. There's one ego thought that has seemed to split into billions and billions of different people. But it's really not like that. There's only one mind, there's only one right mind, and there's only one wrong mind. And we all have this one collective wrong mind that has chosen to believe in the idea that we're apart. And what do these awful things, these genocides, these shootings show us? They show us that we do seem to be apart. That is the purpose that they serve. They seem to underline this idea that the separation is real. And what do we see when we actually look at these with eyes of true love and compassion? We see that the same thought system that led Hitler to killing all these millions of people, and all these other sort of tragedies, the same thought system is within us too. As other people have said, within all of us is a Jesus, and within all of us is a Hitler. And if we can really acknowledge that, if we can really say, okay, that ego thought system in them is the same as the ego thought system in me, we're moving to this idea of togetherness. Now, we don't want to stay at that level, because otherwise there tends to be a lot of guilt and blame around this idea, oh, well, I have this murderous feeling within myself. We want to move through that murderous thought system and see that that too is ultimately meaningless. That we move through the one ego back to the one experience of love and joy. So we do have to look the shadow fully in the face and see that we're not separate from it, but then we also see that it has no power unless we give it that power.
Yeah, it's a wonderful eye-opener for us when we recognize that there's only one will, and that's the will of our Father, will of God, and anything that doesn't fall under that isn't real, and so I found this section getting ready for today's group that I'm going to afterwards, and we're in a section in chapter 22 called Salvation and the Holy Relationship is the name of the chapter, but it's right at the very beginning, the message of the holy relationship. And I just want to read a little bit of it here. Let reason take another step. If you attack whom God would heal, and hate the one he loves, right? That's my brother. Then you and your Creator have a different will. Yet if you are his will, what you must then believe is that you are not yourself. So now, I've got this whole belief system going on that isn't true. I'm believing I'm something other than the Son of God. You can indeed believe this, and you do. And you have faith in this and see much evidence on its behalf. What are we talking about with insane behavior, right? And where, you wonder, does your strange uneasiness, your sense of being disconnected, and your haunting fear of lack of meaning in yourself arise? It is as though you wandered in without a plan of any kind, except to wander off, for only that seems certain. And there's a perfect description of the dream world, isn't it? Yet we have heard a very similar description earlier, but it was not of you. But still, this strange idea, which it does accurately describe, you think is you. Reason would tell you that the world you see through eyes that are not yours must make no sense to you. To whom would seeing such as this send back its messages? Surely not you, whose sight is wholly independent of the eyes that look upon the world. If this is not your vision, what can it show to you? The brain cannot interpret what your vision sees. This you would understand. The you being, right, the Son of God. The brain interprets to the body of which it is part, but what it says you cannot understand. Yet you have listened to it, and long and hard you tried to understand its messages. And we keep repeating that same error over and over and over again, right? We see something outside of ourselves and we believe it's reality, and it's just further strengthening our belief in that being reality. And it's just this vicious circle that goes on until, like this was just said, we have this strange uneasiness that comes over us, and we start to say, wait a minute, there's the beginning. I often refer to it as, the beginning of the acceptance of grace, when we start to question and we start to hear the Holy Spirit's voice in us saying, this is crazy. This thought system is crazy.
Yeah, it is really a breach from sanity, because sanity is a state of being, at peace.
Yeah.
If you are sane, you are at peace and you are experiencing life in a joyous way. So if you are feeling discomfort when events like this occur, that merely means that you're buying in to the madness, that you're allowing yourself to be insane in order to be able to participate in this grand adventure that we call life on planet Earth. But today's lesson from the text, or from the workbook, lesson number 46, also parallels what you just read, Charlie, in that it gives us a sense that, you know, the truth can only come to us through the act of forgiveness. It says God does not forgive because he is never condemned. And that's basically the fundamental process. You know, you cannot forgive unless you have condemned. And there must be condemnation before forgiveness is necessary. Forgiveness is a great need of this world, but that is because it is a world of illusions. Those who forgive are thus releasing themselves from the illusions, while those who withhold forgiveness are binding themselves to them. As you condemn only yourself, so do you forgive only yourself. So, you know, the noose starts to tighten, and you have to be willing to look at the world through the eyes of honesty. And so if we're believing that all these separate parts of ourself have been harmed or killed, and that one part of ourself is responsible for that, then we're continuing our reliance on the dream. We're continuing to experience the addiction of the dream. And that really is the question. Do you want to stay in a world where you are pretty much guaranteed a repetition of these things, or are you willing to let go of that world and start to float gently to an awakened state where you're in the world but not of the world?
Yeah, reminds me a bit of the movie Inception. There's a part in the movie where they're looking for someone to actually put someone into very, very deep dreaming state. And this guy has developed this drug that basically puts people in again, very deep dream states. And in this place, they actually see just dozens and dozens of people lined up on these cots, all dreaming. And what is he saying, basically? Well, these people are addicted to the dream world. And it's a great metaphor for all of us, actually. All of us here in this world, how addicted we are to the dream. Like, why would we want this when heaven is the alternative? And you could say, in a way, that we're addicted to our individuality. We're addicted to being a separate being. And the idea of letting go of this seems very threatening, right? It seems like, well, I'm going to lose everything. But really, what are we letting go of? We're letting go of the dream. Now, that only seems like a loss if we think the dream is real. And that's the message here, is that we are very convinced that this is real. So that's why, as we approach this, as we start to do our forgiveness work, this thought of sacrifice comes in very strongly. And Jesus has to basically help us through this. He has to help us to see, as he says in the Course, that really what we're asked to give up is nothing. Right? It doesn't seem like that. It seems like we're giving up our attachment to everything here in this world of time and space, which is the process. But what he's helping us to see is that we're actually attached to something that is not so. And when we really can accept that more deeply and more deeply, all of a sudden we realize we can give up these attachments, and we can still do whatever we need to in the world, but we just do it from a very different mindset, because we're not basically beholden to these things that we thought were the source of our happiness, but never really were. So this is the great disillusionment. You could say that forgiveness is all disillusionment, except for it's disillusionment in a very positive way. And but in the beginning, that disillusionment, it feels very disillusioning, right? It feels like we're actually losing something that we want. So this is the process that we're learning. We're learning what we really want, as opposed to what we've always thought we wanted.
Yeah, and I love the thought too. As you're speaking, Barret, I'm recognizing the presence of Holy Spirit throughout all of this. Right? You know, we have this teacher that we've silenced. We've kept out of our insane dream. You know, we don't allow that thoughts alternate thoughts to what the ego wants us to follow, right? We don't allow those in the dream. And yet, once we start to have this awakening, there's a section in here right beyond where I was reading this morning where Jesus is referring to us as little babies. You know, we have to start all over again with this new understanding. And the comforting thing about that is, as he explains, is that we have this comfort with us. We have this teacher, this guide, this helper that is always with us and that we have never left, and it has never left us. And so as we start this journey, we can be comforted, we can be assured, we can feel that that immense love that exists in all of us as we start down the path and we start to recognize, you know, just how insane the belief system we've been buying into is. We don't need to be fearful of leaving it because we have this great comforter with us. That's really sweet. Sweet to remember.
It absolutely is, and it is a viable presence. I mean, a tangible presence, because on multiple occasions in my own life experience, when I have reached out in supplication for, you know, assistance and for support, on more than one instance, I have felt an actual tangible presence right next to me. So it's not like a fantasy that you're engaging in within your mind that would complicate all the other fantasies. The truth is, it's like a lifesaver that has been tossed to you on the end of a rope, and you know you're struggling out at sea. Well, it is there. It is an available resource, and you really need to grab onto it, because otherwise the dream will continue to be as tumultuous as it has been. And knowing the inclination of the ego, it is most likely going to get worse. So even though you may have a brief lull in one lifetime where you have the magic touch and everything goes your way, there's going to be other lifetimes when that little child starving to death in Ethiopia on the back of a magazine is you. And we have to be willing to look at that, because all suffering is suffering that you are experiencing, even though in this little bubble of your current ego ride through this realm, you may be imagining that, oh, life is good. But the truth is, every one of those kids who was shot down mercilessly yesterday is you. And you have to look at that and be willing to question it, and then to start to transcend it, to step away from it.
Yeah, when we really look at these things, as you're naming, Chris, that are so awful, like this shooting that happened yesterday and children starving, and you know, here in the US and other parts of the world, it does take a certain amount of practice and patience to be with the awfulness of it, to see, as you're saying, that we're not really separate from it. But then ultimately to transcend it too, as you're just saying, because we can look at anything, you know, when we know that it's not the truth. If we're watching a horror movie on the screen, we can look at some really grisly and terrible things. But a part of us is fine because we're like, oh, it's just a movie. And the challenge is that this world doesn't seem so unreal. But it actually is. This world is literally as unreal as a movie we would watch in the movie theater. But it's very convincing. And some people don't like this idea because they would say, well, if we don't think this is unreal, what's to stop us from, you know, being vicious or violent or uncaring or, you know, that kind of thing. But this sort of, the opposite is actually what occurs, is when we come to see that this world is simply a dream that we're starting to wake up from. We can be more compassionate, we can be more kind, we can be more helpful, even as figures in the dream, as we go forward in our awakening process. And it leads us to a very different state. And it's a state where we can be compassionate in the face of extreme situations that would be terrifying to almost everyone else. And why? Because we know that this body is not really what we are. And that's how Jesus could teach us in the Course, as he did in the sections about the crucifixion, that the crucifixion was a teaching of love. Why is he saying that? What does that mean? Well, he's saying that his body was not what he was, that his body could be killed, but that he could not be hurt. He could not be ended. And his resurrection was basically a symbol of that. It's ultimately a resurrection of the mind that was, symbolized in the resurrection of the body. But the important thing was that he knew that he was beyond pain, he was beyond suffering. And again, that seems pretty radical, and it is an advanced spiritual state, but it's a message that we can all hear, and we can all ultimately grow into ourselves and find that same level of peace and understanding.
Yeah, and I'm reflecting as you're speaking, Barret, on this choice between love and fear. And this eagle's story, of course, is the one of fear, and it wants us to buy into the belief system that we are lacking something. And I'm going to get that from my brother in that thought system. And what I'm lacking, I'm going to take from you. And yesterday's events are an expression of that, But the alternative, as you're saying, as we start to head towards the other, start to head towards love and away from fear, all we really want to do is give to our brother. We want to share what we're receiving and give away what we're receiving, rather than be in this place of the ego that says, I need to take from my brother because I am somehow in lack. So it's a real clear distinction for us as we start to reflect and we start to spend time. I was looking for a specific sentence in the Course, of course, thinking I was going to just flip right to it, but it didn't come up anyway. But the sentence being, that's where we think we really are. Like you were just saying, we think we are in this illusion. We think that illusion is real. And as we start to wake up and let this little bit of light in, we start to see, oh, wait a minute, this is just, as yesterday evidence of, it's just a nightmare. It's just a bad dream. And we can awaken from this. And again, we have that guidance. We have that help. We have that loving help. And, as Chris touched on too, we want to just share this. We want to just give this away because it is so overwhelmingly beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. And whenever you bottleneck anything, you cut yourself off from that particular source or resource. So if you stop extending to those around you, if you stop sharing your love, then all of a sudden your world starts to dry up and you begin to turn a Garden of Eden into a desert wasteland. So in situations like this, we have to be very sensitive to the fact that this demands that we become a vessel of love and put our attention and our prayers and our affirmations into just, drowning these occurrences in love, because that's the only way they're ever going to begin to diminish. And eventually they will diminish when enough of us are consciously putting our attention on these events in such a fashion. So it's not by legislation, it's not by punishment, it is not by, rhetoric. It is by replacing the hate and fear that cause the events with love and the assuredness that nothing ever really actually happened, and that the soul, the spirit, God's creation, God's holy child, is still perfectly at peace and surrounded by love, and death had no power over that child. So, these are stressful times in some ways, but magnificent as far as the opportunities presented to us to step forward and say, this is what I have come into awareness of as a result of studying A Course in Miracles. And this is how I can respond to my world and to the life I am having. by bringing love in instead of hatred and all of the other rejection ideas that, oh, that was somebody else that did that, that wasn't me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other point that comes to mind for me is just the message to be appropriate. You know, if you or a loved one is actually touched by these events, you know, this is not the time to preach to people and say, none of this is real, none of this is happening. Really what is called for is just kindness and compassion. As we're talking about this sharing of love, it's always about just being kind, but being appropriate too. Letting others, letting yourself grieve and mourn, going through the emotions that you're feeling. You can call on these thoughts of the Course as you're going through all that. And oftentimes they can sort of help move you through the grief even more quickly than you might otherwise. But allow yourself your emotions and allow other people their emotions too. So as Ken Wapnick was well known for saying, don't forget to be normal as you're going through these experiences.
Yes, it's very true. Yeah, you know, and there's and just one last thing about that. There was, again, for me, it seems to be this idea of this comforter today, but that is so comforting, you know, that you can be in that consciousness and be in that awareness inside yourself and just be at peace and sharing that love in that way. We don't ever really need to open our mouths and express anything that's going to possibly be upsetting. So, but man, there's nothing that it's very hard for people not to accept the love if that's where we are.
Yeah, that's definitely a fact. It is completely and totally unnecessary for us to vocalize anything, but to step into a situation and know that we are the presence of love. You know, like in the workbook, we are taught, or we learn that our presence, because we are the holy child of God, brings holiness into any environment that we encounter. So when we look lovingly upon the world without saying a word, we are fulfilling our function. We're bringing love into a realm that is so desperately in need of it. So absolutely, Barret, we do not need to counsel people verbally unless they actually, you know, want to talk to us about something specific. But by our presence, we are bringing light into darkness, and that's all we need to do.
Yeah, it's beautiful. You know, as within, so without, as you guys are both saying, the way to heal these things is to uncover our own hatred or anger or fear within our own hearts and bring it into the light so that it can be healed. And the only way that we'll ever experience outer peace is by finding the inner peace first. So if we can keep remembering that, that serves us in this situation and in every situation.
Yeah.
You know, there's all kinds of things that can push our buttons or make us fearful. But when we can remember what it's really for, which is for our forgiveness, it's for our healing, for our awakening, then we're actually making the best use of these upsets, of these tragedies as we can.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, it's moving toward the top of the hour. Charlie's got to run and do some stuff. I'm sure Barret wants to go out and play with the snowblower before all the snow goes away.
I know. I'm so sad all the snow is melting. There goes my fun.
Stick around. There's more on the way. So you know, that's you can be assured of. But nonetheless, the stuff that we've got on the ground has gotten really dirty and ugly. So it's time for it to evaporate and us to get a blanket of fresh white snow.
Well, this has been a beautiful day as always, guys. I look forward to connecting with you guys again.
Yeah, me too. Thank you very much, both of you. It's always great. I love it.
Absolutely. And, you know, I just encourage everybody to get out there and share the love, pass the love around. And that's all you need to do. That really is it. There is nothing else that is being demanded of you. So we will reconvene in 1 week.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a
Catch
great
you guys
week.
later.
Bye bye.
Bye.